Hey everyone, today we're going to be taking a look at a few photography tips for Gran Turismo 7, but this can be used for all of sim racing and photography in general. I will refer to a few rules in this video, but don't see them as rules, just see them as guidelines or suggestions. These things will be pretty useful for you, especially if you're starting off with sim racing photography. So let's get started. So for this video, we're going to do about 8 tips. We're not going to be talking too much about color in this video. We're going to mostly be talking about composition and the positioning of objects within your photo. And with all these rules that I'm going to be mentioning here, you don't have to use all of them for one photo. You can use different rules for different pictures. It's up to you. Before I continue, if you're from New Zealand and you want to get into sim racing with new sim racing gear, you want to pick up new gaming equipment as well, then head over to NZ Gaming. I'll leave their link in the description. All the sim racing equipment that I use for these videos, including the wheel base, and the pedals, it's all been kindly provided by NZ Gaming, so be sure to check them out. So starting off, we're going to talk about the rule of thirds. Now for the rule of thirds, we currently have the frame right here in front of us split into a grid of thirds. And the idea here is that we split different features of the image into different sections of the thirds grid. So for example, right now on this grid, we have the car on the bottom right there sitting on the third in the bottom corner. We have the mountain up on the top right there covering a couple thirds. Then we have the negative clear space, which is the sky on the top left there. We have a smaller mountain on the left side. We have some more negative space with the foreground on the bottom left 2 squares. And then in the center, we have the road. We can also experiment with it. We have the car really tucked up in the corner right now. We can move it over so we have the sort of cross section of the thirds boxes right there in the center of the car. And now the car's a bit more of a central feature of the picture. So this one's fairly self-explanatory. You just want to balance the features of your image in a bit of a thirds layout, and it looks quite nice. Now onto the second tip of this video, which would be leading lines. And now within this image right here, we don't have any significant leading lines, but we do have this road here right in the middle, and it kind of leads our eyes back and forth between the car and the other side of the image. So this photo, for example, has a few leading lines in it. We have the fence on the right hand side and the left hand side, along with the grass and the white painted lines on the road. They lead towards the middle of this picture. And another form of line you could actually think of in this picture is actually the road. When your eyes lead from the fences to the middle of the picture, the road then leads to the cars in the center. I think this photo has quite a good balance. It's got good spacing, and it also follows another form of thirds as well. As you can see, it's split up into sort of different sections. We have the cars on the bottom left there. We have that line that goes right through the middle and a diagonal sort of line. And then we have the negative clean space, which is the sky on the top of the photo. And another little tip I'll just throw in here is tilting the camera, rolling it to the side like I have in this picture, sometimes just adds a little bit of effect to it and looks really cool. Another photo with some leading lines in it, we have the road itself and the fence that curves from the left side of the screen through around here to where we see the car, leading our eyes back and forth between the car and the other side of the corner, and then beyond where the mountains are. And in this picture as well, we also have a few leading lines. We have the fence on the right there, we have the white painted line along with the grass towards the bottom of the screen. Those shade sails on the left side sort of act as a line that leads towards the more significant part of the grandstand, which is the big feature on this photo aside from the car. So in a photo like this, you've got 2 main features. You've got the car and you've got the big grandstand in the background. Obviously in this photo we have the car pointing towards the grandstand, which also leads our eyes that way, along with the leading lines pointing to the big feature in the background. On to the next tip I have here, it's keeping things simple. Sometimes you don't need a lot going on in your picture to make it stand out. In this picture, I won't say it's my favorite, but it's not a bad picture. We have very distinguishable sections of this picture. We have the car and the road on the left hand side. We have the curb and the painted line in the middle, with some grass on the right along with the fence. Very simple picture, but it stands out. And then again, from a slightly different angle, we're looking towards the fence at this time. We have the car at the bottom with a bunch of negative space, which is the road. Negative space being the sort of blank areas of the picture where there's a consistent bland color, which isn't really the focus of the eye in the picture. We have the car, which is the main focus. Negative space being the road. We have the white painted line there along with the fence, then a bit of grass at the top. Very simple, but again, it stands out. And an easy way of trying to get these simplified photos is to take quite a wide track and get a bird's eye view photo of the car, looking from the car above, looking down at the track as you see here, and the picture we looked at before. You see most of the track and then a few other features in the background. It looks very simplified like it does here, but again, looks very good. For our next tip, I mentioned it before, but this would be negative space. As I explained before, negative space is that sort of empty space in the background which doesn't have a whole lot going on. So for example, the sky, it might be water, it might be like the ocean in another picture. Just the areas in a photo that don't have focus. For example, in this picture, it's the sky, and you can use it to your advantage depending on what kind of photo you want to go for. If you want to have a really simplified photo, then you're going to need to use a lot more negative space. If you're aiming to squeeze in more objects in your photo, then you're going to have less negative space. But be sure to keep your negative space balanced, keep it in one sort of area of the picture, or keep it kind of symmetrical. Don't throw into random areas of the image, it'll distract the eye and make it less appealing. Back to this image really quickly, we can consider the grass and the road as negative space. Nothing really going on there. To be honest, there's not a whole lot going on throughout this entire photo, but that grass and the road are significant areas of negative space. And they kind of space out the main features of this image. For example, the car, we have the curb in the middle, and then the fence on the right. And again, back to this picture, our negative space is balanced because we have the green grass on the bottom there on the right, and then on the sort of opposite side of the picture, we have the sky there at the top. And in between all that, we have the detail of the image, which is the grandstand and then the car. And for my next tip of this video would be frames within a frame. So we have our main frame of the picture, which is just the entire rectangle along the outside of our picture. And then we have, in this picture for example, we have that big structure in the middle of the bridge is the frame around the car in the middle. It's a very small kind of frame, but it fits our car in the middle. I'm not a big fan of this picture because of the distracting detail behind the car. The car kind of gets a bit lost behind that detail. It would have been nice if those signs and the hill was a little bit less cluttered. But this is one of the better examples I could get. Another example could be using a bridge. This again isn't a great example, but we've got a bridge over the top which kind of comes down on the side. We don't have a closing edge of the frame on the left side, and we have the road at the bottom that kind of closes it in. Not the greatest example, but the idea here is just to have frames that sort of wrap around the main object of the photo. The next tip here is using depth in our photos. Depth is important for these pictures that include a lot of area in them. And this photo is a really good example for depth because we have a very obvious foreground here at the front. We have the car and the background, which is very blurred by the way, which creates that sense of speed. The car's going very fast. But then we have the sort of middle ground, which is also negative space here, which is the lake in the center. And then we have another very distinguishable background, which are the mountains in the background. And giving each of these features a very clear space in your photo creates that depth and makes the photo seem a lot bigger. Remember that picture we looked at before with the massive grandstand behind the car? Well, you can see away in the distance in this photo on the right, and look how small it looks here. It just makes the mountains look a whole lot huger as well. On the next tip, I'm going to be talking about patterns. Now that can be something that's kind of repetitive within the photo, but that also creates a nice effect. For example, we have the fence on the right side there, which is a bit of a pattern itself, and then behind that, along the hillside, we have that sort of grid-looking thing, which is a bit of repetition. It has a bit of an artistic look to it. We get a little bit of repetition in this photo as well, with the fence in the middle there, with that sort of blurred out logo. It creates a sort of repetitive line throughout the middle, and that line in the middle also separates the foreground from the background. And back to this photo again, we have a bit of a symmetrical pattern going along with the cables on the bridge there, which create this really nice artistic effect as well. And once again, in this picture, we see some more repetition and patterns going on with the lines on the roof. We actually have really nice leading lines with the tiles on the floor and on the roof, the lines pointing towards the center of this image, with the column in the middle sort of separating both sides of the image with the car on the left and the car on the right. I really like this picture. And with the pillars along the window in the background, with these holes in the roof bringing in blue light, more patterns and repetition all working together to create a nice effect. And now for my final tip of this video, that would be to experiment with your camera angles. And two big examples of this would to either be to lower your camera so you're looking up at your car, that makes the car look bigger and more intimidating, or we can position the camera more above the car, which creates an effect where the car looks a bit smaller and makes the background more of a feature on the photo. In this particular photo, where the camera's positioned, it makes the track look very wide and the big structure on the bridge looks huge above this car. In this picture, we have quite a nice effect where the camera's quite low down and the car's quite close to the camera, so the car's still a main feature of this picture, but we have the grandstand in the background that we're looking up at, which makes it look huge and a significant part of this photo. So because of that, and the car being there, we have two main parts of this image. In one final example here, we have the camera quite high up looking down at the cars, which makes the cars look a little bit smaller and makes the track itself look a lot larger and more of a significant part of the image. This picture also has a very nice clean leading line that goes from the top right corner, the track leading all the way to the cars in the foreground here. And now we're just going to look at one photo I've taken and see what kind of rules that I've actually used in this photo to make it look the way it does. So starting from the first of my tips on this list, I actually used the rule of thirds in this image by having the car in the sort of bottom left third there. We have the cactus and the hillside there on the bottom right. We have the sun on the top right corner, and then we have a bit more negative space on the top left. We also have some good leading lines in this image. We have the top of the hill on the right there pointing straight towards the car. We have the orange fence down there by the cactus also pointing straight towards the car, and then that line on the right, on the left side of the car also pointing right towards the car, which is the main attraction of this image. We're also keeping this image very simple. There's not too many objects within this image. We have the car, we have the cactus, the fence, the sky and the sun, and there's not too much else going on in here. The sky in the top half of this image is negative space and gives the photo a more cleaner and more simple look to it. I don't have any framing going on in this picture, and I also don't really have any sort of patterns going on in this picture. And we have quite a good camera angle for this photo. We have the car looking very intimidating as it comes downhill with the camera low down, makes the car look like it means business. So I hope some of those tips might have helped you out when it comes to photography. They're kind of basic, and like I said, you don't have to follow these rules. These are just some guidelines. And like I said at the start of the video, you don't have to cram all of these rules into one image. You can use different rules for different kinds of images. It doesn't all have to be in one photo. You're not always going to have framing in your image. In some photos, you're not always going to have a whole lot of negative space. And your photo doesn't have to be simplified. You can fit a lot in a picture with it still looking good. So to finish off this video, if you want any further tips, I would suggest for you to search photography composition rules on Google. That'll give you some good results. And if you'd like more help getting good colors in your images and balancing your colors, then I'd suggest for you to search up the photographic color wheel. If you guys want to keep up to date with new sim racing news, updates, content, blog posts, leagues, activities and more, then be sure to check out simrace247.com, and some of my content's there, so be sure to give them a visit. Be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments. I'd like to hear what you guys think of this video. Thank you all for watching. Thanks to NZ Gaming for sponsoring the equipment that I'm using in these videos. Take care everyone, and I'll see you soon.